Hey, it's Debbie, and I am doing another podcast with my friend Lat Monsieur from HVMN to talk about ketone IQ new research that is out that you might be interested in. So we decided to do another podcast. Also, we are going to talk about if it is necessary, take exogenous ketones pre-workout, during workout, post-workout, what type of workout, intensity, duration, and more. And also, I will ask him if it's necessary, if you are doing a low carb ketogenic diet, to take additional ketones. What benefits does that serve? So we'll ask him some of those questions, but head back to our last podcasts. When did we do it? Last year? I think we've done 2 last year. And I also talked about taking ketones pre and post workout, and even during a long bike ride, as I've done, or a long run, in a previous podcast of my Debbie solo casts, and talking about some of their protocols that you can find on HVMN, their website. So it's the website help.hvmn.com. You can find some of the benefits and their protocols on taking the ketone IQ. And I did see that they're now available in Sprouts, and they have the single serve bottles. As I was just taking a shot, then I put it down, actually knocked it half of it knocked all over my desk just now. But there is the bigger bottles, but I like these small bottles. I actually keep them in my work bag. So when I go work off site away from home, I can take one of these when I'm doing more intensive work or doing podcasting where I need to get my brain, believe it or not, sometimes it doesn't work very well, especially end of the days today. And I'm more of a morning person. So sometimes you need a little boost for that brain focus. And the workout, I've been experimenting taking ketones before a spin class when it's a hard workout. I don't do spin class usually, but started doing this Wednesday morning workout at the Bay Club in Carmel Valley where I go. And it is taking, well, it's FTP related. So figure out your functional threshold, power threshold, and work at different percentages. So it's supposed to be really zone 4, zone 5 workout down to zone 1 doing intervals, but we'll generate lots of power, get those watt goals, and seeing if, does this help me get a little more oomph out of my body, out of my legs? And it did. I think yesterday I did feel pretty good, and I was hitting a little bit higher numbers. We did a 8-minute piece recovery for about 3 minutes, and then 6-minute, 4-minute, 2 minutes. And then we did 30-second hard as you can, trying to beat your watts each time. And if you know your FTP, you can go by that, but just helps sometimes to see what you reached before and try to beat that number. Anyways, does this help or not? There's some new research out for anaerobic workouts. So we'll talk about the new research as well. So here is Lat. Let's bring him in the show. All right, we have Lat back on the show, and we're going to talk about some new research findings, and I'll share some of, I just talked about, as I was waiting for you, my experiences taking my ketone IQ shots in my workouts, doing my own N=1 experiments, and I'm excited to do PNOE, my new metabolic testing cart, adding that in pre-workout and during. So thanks, Lat, for coming on the show, because you are the man behind the research.
Thank you for having me again, Debbie. I feel like, we're like doing this routinely now.
I
Were you
know.
at KetoCon recently?
No, I was
You
supposed
didn't
to
make it.
go, and then I just had too much going on, and then I wasn't
It's
speaking at it this year, so I didn't go.
Yeah, it's the same situation with me as I decided to go in the beginning and then everything just came up and I just recorded and I told you I just recorded the podcast with Ben Greenfield. It's coming out on 18th on both Ben Greenfield's platform as well as
Wow.
HVMN podcast. So remember to check it
Wow.
out.
Yeah, you guys are huge because Huberman Lab is now sponsoring Ketone IQ. And I think, Ben is amazing. I know Ben, but Huber, both being on those shows, and Huberman has like, I don't know, 3 million followers now. That's huge to say
Yeah.
that you don't need any research studies. If he's behind it, it's good.
Yeah, it took a while because we had to send him the research and make sure that he tries it, he feels the difference. And you know what, like we're still working on different partners, and we've had Dave Asprey talking about ketone IQ. We've got Max Lugavere talking about ketone IQ. I think there's still so many leading scientists and physicians out there. And I think nowadays, especially like this week, I'm releasing an episode on HVMN podcast with a doctor in Chicago, Dr. Donald Radin. In his clinic, he actually prescribes ketone IQ to his patients for metabolic health. And we started to have a lot of doctors referring their patients to us. So now I had started this project that we are outreaching to these doctors. It's like, hey, since you guys are already referring your patients to us and we don't know about you, like let's talk and let's be partners, and let's make sure that you get the best price and your patients get the best price, so that it can be accessible for everyone.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is accessibility. You know, not everyone has the money to buy these things, these shots, but when is it necessary to invest in your health and,
Yeah.
you know, spend money on something like this when you know you try it and you feel a difference? I'm all about spending all my money on things that are going to improve my health and wellness and longevity.
And
As well
I'm
as,
also sponsoring Ketone IQ for researchers as well, who are doing research in exogenous ketones, either in performance or therapeutic areas. Like, contact me, lad@hvmn.com. Happy to talk about it on case-per-case basis. And we just want to get this out as much as possible so that we get as much data as possible, so that we can learn what does ketone IQ do. You know, we know a lot already, but there's so much more to be discovered, like the specific mechanism of action to mitochondria, the anti-inflammatory properties, specifically on neurodegenerative diseases, mental health, which is one of the papers that we just published on metabolic psychiatry. And now another paper is also in review looking at anaerobic exercise, which we'll talk about as well. So very exciting to share.
you're doing a lot. So how are you taking care of you?
You know, that's a great question, Debbie. I was asked the same question 2 days ago. Because last week was a bit of a stressful week, and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, as much as I'm passionate about this job, it's the same as every job, right? They bound to have ups and downs and stressful times, and last week was one of those. And 2 days ago, I was working at the gym, and it was Monday. It was 3 days ago, and my friend asked me, so how's it going? I was like, well, as good as Monday can go, right? And he said, well, most importantly, did you take time off for yourself? And I was like, that's a great question. It's something that I always talk about on our podcast. That's always what I always tell my friends to do, but sometimes we forget to do it ourselves. So
Yeah.
so I'm taking care of myself. I'm making sure I eat healthy. I cook at home, make sure I have whole foods. I have my ketone IQ with me, and I'm working out, lifting 5 days a week, and then cardio the other two. And then I also do cardio at the end of my lifts as well. So hopefully all of that is enough to keep me sane and healthy. And so far, my sleep scores are not too bad. It could be better. It's like in the 70s, 80s, yes, high 70s sort of score. So
Is that on Aura, or how do you track
it's
your sleep?
that's on Fitbit. My Oura ring is arriving this Friday, so I'll have multiple data points.
Because they all tell, because I look at my
The range
clients'
is a bit
metrics, and
different.
yeah, Whoop versus Aura are so different. And then ideally we should have a chest strap to really know what our HRV is and our LF to HF score. And so it's like, okay, I need to know more, but how much stuff can we keep tracking?
Exactly.
So I'm curious about the new research anaerobic, as I've been experimenting on my endurance workouts, and I've had clients that are doing like 200, 300-mile bike rides, take this middle ride to help focus and clarity when they get tired, especially when they have to ride overnight, adventure racing, when you need that mind focus and clarity. And then, you know, cycling, you have to, even just my longer bike rides, taking it. So what do we know for just general endurance athletes? Why would we need something? How would this benefit us? And then shift to the new research you're finding in anaerobic workouts, when you have to do high intensity and generate power and effort, get to that. What I've been talking in my podcast a lot about zone 4, zone 5, and how we can create more energy to do that. Because I know I need to do zone 5, but I struggle to get there because it's hard.
Right.
So tell
you
me
really
kind of
have
where
to push yourself. So
Yeah.
let's start with the endurance part. I think we've
Mhm.
talked about it quite a bit on this channel and
Yes,
on
for
our
sure.
channel as well. And that has been established quite well that, when taken correctly under the right protocol and right situation, it does induce glycogen sparing effect, and it helps with a longer endurance race, either cycling or even running. And as you said, the cognitive portion of the benefit is definitely there. And I'm glad your clients find that helpful as well. And even like now we've got athletes such as Sarah Hall, marathoner.
Mm-hmm.
She's on Ketone IQ list of athletes as well. Right now, as we speak, Michael Brand, our CEO, is pacing for Dawn in
I saw that.
Arizona.
The 100
Um,
miler.
yeah, so
Yeah.
100 miler, and they are fueled by Ketone IQ. We've got athletes across the world, even in Australia and Europe, who have been trying Ketone IQ and gone on super long runs without any water but Ketone IQ, and that video has gone viral on YouTube. So I think it's both the energetic portion of ketones, just providing you with energy and really helping you spare whatever glycogen you have left, and also being able to tap into the fat storage, being able to upregulate the ketone mechanisms, the enzymes that's needed to be converted to convert fats into ketones, as well as metabolize it for energy. And then the direct effect of ketones on the brain and really upregulating all these activities in your brain and within neurons and within brain regions, and having that increased stability of brain network is very useful for endurance exercise. Now, when we shift gear to anaerobic exercise, so as I said, we just finished a study with University of North Georgia, one of the leading military colleges in the US, and we looked at anaerobic exercise using Ketone IQ and carbs. And this has never been looked into before, because all this while we know that ketones come from fats. When we produce our own ketones, endogenous ketones, we are turning our fats into ketones within our liver. And exogenous ketones provide us with a physiological state that we have never been able to achieve, where we have high level of glucose and high level of ketones. What we have done with University of North Georgia is we have a bunch of participants run a 5K run. They were fueled by glucose and ketones at their own pace. We didn't see any difference there, which is what we would expect. It's a short run, everyone, some of them anecdotally, they felt clearer in terms of the subjective feedback. There have been improvements significantly. But right after the 5K run, they have to hop onto a stationary bike and do a Wingate test, Wingate anaerobic test.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who do not know what that is, it's 5 rounds of 10-second sprints as hard as you could push at 7.5% of your body weight as resistance. And we measured their respiratory exchange ratio. So to make sure that, to identify whether they're burning more fat or sugar. We measure their heart rate, we measure their ketone levels, and we measure their fatigue levels as well as their power output. And to our surprise, because we know that anaerobic exercise relies heavily on glucose, because glycolysis is going to be upregulated because it's oxygen independent ATP generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't need oxygen. So whenever you go for a hard hitting anaerobic intensive exercise, you usually turn up glycolysis, because that's a fast way of getting energy without having to rely on oxygen, because we can't get oxygen fast enough into our bodies. And that's what anaerobic means, right? Anaerobic without oxygen. What we have seen with this study is that across the board, we saw an average power increase, peak power increase, velocity increase, and decrease in fatigue in the ketone IQ and carbs group versus just carb alone.
How are you measuring fatigue?
So they are measuring fatigue and the fatigue index. I think it's a drop, it's a function of a drop of power over the 5 bouts of exercises. The paper is currently still being reviewed, so hopefully we'll be able to publish it within the next few weeks. and then you'll be able to find out the exact protocol that UNG runs. So the great thing about this is that while we did sponsor the study, I have no hand whatsoever in the conduct of the study itself. It's fully unbiased and neutral, given by done by the university itself. I gave some feedback on the protocol and whatnot from what I know from a scientific point of view, and then I let them run with it. Because, and of course, like, these are also academia who want to really uphold the scientific integrity, and it was done really, really nicely. So
hold on though. Question, as I'm
yes.
going to start doing my metabolic testing cart myself and doing my own studies, are they doing, like, how long were they eating beforehand? Were they doing low carb? Was that all going to be included in the study? Like, how do they prepare for the test?
They will be prepared. There will be everything will be included in the study. We did a 7-day adaptation with Ketone IQ. We asked them to take it before bed. One of the reason was also we were hoping to measure what the effect of Ketone IQ has in terms of bed and HRV. We didn't see any significant effect, improvement, nor detriment, unfortunately. So maybe there are other ways of measuring that. In terms of sleep, that's still something that I'm very interested in. So 7 days of adaptation. On the 8th day, it's test day. None of these people were on low carb diet. They were on standard diet. They were given the standard breakfast before they did the exercise. I believe 2 hours before, but I have to double check. I don't remember on top of my head. And then half an hour before, they were given 0.5 grams per kilogram of Ketone IQ. So we body matched it so that it makes it more normalized in a study. And then that's before the 5K. And then after the 5K, we top up Ketone IQ before the Wingate. And then after the third bout of Wingate, we stop them. So in between every bout, they have, I believe, 20 or 30 seconds rest as well. And we check their blood glucose and blood ketone levels after the third one as well. And usually at that point, their body will start fatiguing towards the fourth and fifth bout. And that's when the drop in power and fatigue level increases. And that's where we saw the benefit of ketones. Now, you may ask, how does that work, right? Because as I said earlier, like, glucose is being utilized mainly for anaerobic exercise, and ketone is more in the fat category. Like, why do we see an increase in performance? One could argue that during the 5K run, the people who were on Ketone IQ are sparing their glycogen a bit more, so they have more glycogen to play around during the Wingate anaerobic tests. However, it may not be enough to have a significant improvement in performance. We don't know that, right? We didn't do any muscle biopsies and look at the glycogen sparing effects specifically, but it could also very well be impacted by the direct effect of Ketone IQ on the brain in terms of analgesic effect. So similar to caffeine, for example, it does blunt the pain sensation to a certain extent so that people can push further, especially as you're talking about zone 4 and 5. As you said, it's hard, right? You need to be mentally resilient as well as physically resilient. So maybe it helps with the receptors and the sensation of pain, so that you kind of partially numb that feeling, and therefore you can push further and feel less fatigue after.
Okay, so stop there. That's huge right there. Mental resiliency. I think that's the biggest thing for me personally, is being an endurance athlete forever. I can go long, no problem. Forever, 4 or 5 hours, I'm good. Forrest Gump. But give me short intensity, all out, bust my butt, doing 30-second sprints, trying to get, 300 plus watts on a bike is hard. And I'm learning, doing this metabolic testing certification, that to go to, test what your zone 4 or 5 is, zone 5. And Dr. Stacy Sims is all about women need to do 20, 30-second sprints. But you have to be able to go deep in that pain cave to push yourself to even get that high up there. So I would think right there, that's a motivator to me to like try a shot before,
Yeah.
as I've been doing before my power spin class that we
Yeah.
do Wednesday mornings, and see if that helps. Cause it did feel better yesterday, but it's hard to tell. Like, am I just thinking that psychological? But it makes sense to me that resiliency mentally, if you're an endurance athlete and you need to do more zone 5, because we go over this on my show, I just did a podcast on this, is zone 2 is beneficial, but you need zone 2 and zone 5 for the mitochondrial benefits. So you need both, but most people can't get there or they're not ready to go to zone
Actually,
5.
I've got a question about that
Yeah.
for you, Debbie. What is the recommended like dosage, if you would, per week? Like how much zone 5 and how much zone 2 that is recommended for mitochondrial health?
Well, sorry, but you have to come visit me and I have to test you to figure out what your appropriate number is. Because that's what I love to do, this metabolic testing, because it isn't one size fits all. Again, we're testing and not guessing what percentage you need more work on. If you're doing too much zone 2, or maybe you're just always in zone 3, now we can figure out what your true zones are based on testing where you are right now, because it's going to be different than what I was 10 years ago, last year, and then figure out where you need to more spend time in. So if it's resistance, interval training, and strength, and then what percentage. So we kind of do that, figure that out by your test results, but also the AI report generates this new way to get results now, as this AI helps us figure out your zones. But based on the test we do, if it's a treadmill or bike or assault bike or rowing machine, then you figure out what you lat needs right now based on your training.
Great. Let's do it. Are you free in July? I think I got some time in July.
I should be good there. I'm just learning. I got to practice. I got someone testing on Monday and it's practicing. But the hardest thing is to clean the equipment. It's the most complicated part, isn't it? But yeah, I think it's an important part. And I was just working on that zone. And that's why I think, what can we do if we are an aging athlete, and especially the female athlete, to be able to do zone 5 if you're fit and have that foundation, and you need more of that all out, because that's my area of opportunity. And then we've identified limiters. When you do the metabolic test, we figure out what your areas you need more work on are your limiters.
Right. And I always tell people as well, when I use it pre-workout for weightlifting, it gets me in the zone. I mean, that's the best. It's a very like a vague way of describing it. But now that I'm looking at the data of the anaerobic exercise, it might be exactly that. When you're mentally in the zone, you're literally focused, and then the perception of time and pain is very different from when you're distracted.
Yeah.
So
For
I mean,
sure.
I'm sure some neurologist gonna like, either correct
Ask
me or tell me.
Huberman.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be amazing if we can chat about this with, Huberman, for example, and hear his thoughts, because I'm not a neurologist, right? So I as much as I know about like TBI and whatnot around like ketone metabolism, there's so much more about the brain that we don't know. And I think it was somebody who told me that their neurologist lecturer told them that humans, we know the brain as we know less about the brain than we know about the sea, and we know how much we know about the sea. So
Oh, that's good. That's interesting. Yeah, it's always, a lot to learn. That I think, doing, that's why I love this testing, these research studies. Now, the main question, going back to your study you guys just did, was it men and women?
it was men and women. I don't know what the breakdown is though, but it is men and women.
Because that's
And
what we always look at too.
we did, yeah, that's exactly what I tell people on the podcast. Is like, whenever you look at a research study, before you even go straight to the conclusion, if you want to know whether or not the study is relevant to you and applicable to you, look at the protocol, look at the demographics that they're testing. If they're testing a demographic that is pertaining you, if they're testing high performing athletes, 18-year-olds on keto diet, you know exactly where you stand compared to that, right? If you can superimpose that demographic onto your demographic, then the conclusion may very well be applicable to you. Otherwise, you need to really take it with a grain of salt as to why this study may not be fully applicable to you. Or if you do this protocol and then you're not seeing the same results, then you should know why.
Yeah, good point. I know I say that all the time. Okay, another question on the testing. Now, fasted, how, because this is what I'm finding and what I want to do now, that I be able to do it myself. People, when they do these tests, are they, eating anything beforehand, 3-hour fast? Because a lot of the protocols I've been reading about, they'll say, don't eat for 5 hours before the test. But what if people do eat? And so I've been trying to, really dive into research and talking to clients, fed versus fasted workout. If they're testing this, if I ate or did I not have anything on me when I worked out?
So 2 points here. The first point is I always think it's better fed than fasted in this kind of studies, because it reflects more on a ecological, like a natural state. Because most people, when they exercise, when they go for a race, most of the time, most often than not, they will be fed. So that we want that applicability into the athlete groups or whatever population that we're aiming. That's first point. Second point, I think most people, they will ask these participants to fast overnight.
Yep.
However, they will then give them the same breakfast the next day. The whole point of this is to deplete all their glycogen overnight so that they are all going in with the same amount of glycogen. That way, they are fed, quote unquote, but at the same time, they're not fed in, there's just not too much variation in the glycogen stores between participants, which may affect the results. Because then you can argue, okay, he has, big bowl of carbs the day before and wasn't fasted, and then get fed more food, and then he could go further. Is it the ketone IQ or is it the food, right? So I think most of the time they ask you to be fasted and then fed the same breakfast. It's because they want these people to have the same starting point. Because the whole point of studies, of clinical studies, of scientific studies, is to regulate in a controlled manner, have a controlled environment where most of the variables are constant, and you introduce a variable where you want to investigate, and in this case will be ketones versus ketones and carbs versus carbs alone.
So when they did the test, they did a 5K run. Was that anaerobic? You said that was,
that was
kind of
not
aerobic?
Yeah, that was just a 5K run. This is a normal aerobic 5K run at their own pace to finish it, as fast as they could, and then they jump on the bike.
Is that to get them more glycogen depleted by then?
Yeah, so it's a very similar protocol. Recently, I think there's a protocol using ketone salt, which did not see an improvement in performance. So sort of like replicating what's already in the literature, just to show that we are extending the understanding
next level
to the next level in the literature. Because before that protocol came out, it was a lot of 3-hour pre-fatiguing. So they go on a bike for 3 hours and then fully depleted glycogen, and then get fed with glucose and ketones, and then do a 15-minute time trial. So that was all the way back in 2019, 2018 sort of paper. And then the more recent one is like, hey, look, we don't need to fatigue them that long, and we can still see some form of benefit. So this is what we're seeing right now.
So based on your study to increase, performance and the power, the fatigue, is that kind of take that and then extrapolate to what type of workouts would you want to say, hey, this might be good to test out on your blah, blah, blah workout based on these results?
I think one really relevant sport, and this was tested by a lot of friends who does this sport as well, CrossFit. So CrossFit, they have to do those time challenges. They have to finish their workout within X amount of time, and then they'll get the ranking. And most of these tests are very, very anaerobic. It's a combination of weightlifting and cardio and body weight and whatnot. And it's a series of circuit training that requires fast pace and anaerobic sort of push. And they have seen people who have used it, kind of anecdotally told me that they have seen their results gone up in the ranking when they tested it and against their peers. So that's definitely one form of it. Another form is like powerlifting. I guess, powerlifting uses fast explosive energy, and that's probably very good, especially if they are training for it, which means they will be doing repetitive high explosive energy bouts. This would probably help them in one, being able to push more in terms of power, but then two, also recover better from the fatigue as well.
Yeah, my body doesn't do either of those. That's probably why I
Well,
chose
sprints,
endurance, but I'm
yes,
not good at sprinting and power, as I said. So, endurance athlete, triathlon, Ironmans, 50K trail runs, but that's why I need to do more short distance,
right,
high intensity
right.
interval training, because I'm not doing, that's what we talk about.
And the interesting thing is as well, if you heard what I said earlier, it increases average power, it increases peak power, but it also increases velocity, which means that these people were not only pedaling harder, they're also pedaling faster, which makes a lot of difference, because you can go harder, but then you're pedaling slower, right? You can just like push harder and that's it. But these people are also going faster, which makes a lot of difference for sprinting, for short distance sprintings, and even for people who are on endurance race and then towards last mile or last 100 meters where they really need to push
Next
themselves.
gear.
Yeah,
The pain cave.
yeah, exactly.
So I know that's, what I was just thinking what I could do in our spin class. They use these bikes called Stages bikes, and they have an app, and you can sync the power output, your bike workout, because we push start, stage, and all this stuff. I'm new. I started it in January, but I hate bringing my phone to work out because it's distraction. And so I should try hooking my phone, the app of the Stages app on my phone, up to the bike, so I can save these workouts and see my progression by taking this and do my own N=1 experiment.
That's one thing I love about you, Debbie. You always try all these new things. Oh, there's a new technology coming out. Like I need it. I need to have my hands on it. And keep trying all these like different ways to track it, different ways to really leverage technology essentially and figure out where we are and thinking the physiology with technology.
Yes. And that's why I would say don't blame the aging process, embrace it and change how you train if you want to live your best life, your second half of life, instead of all these people that complain, I can't do this or that. It's like, well, you got to approach it differently. Maybe supplement a little bit with ketones. So, okay. Another question was what I mentioned earlier before we started, but fueled versus fasted. We talk a little bit, but those people doing low carb already, or maybe they're doing really strict ketogenic diet, which I'm having, my clients are all too strict. I have to get them to not be afraid of nature's carbs. And what do you think of taking ketones if they're already trying to be in strict nutritional ketosis diet? Should they take exogenous ketones?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I would say try it and see how you feel first. Like first and foremost, no matter what I say, how you feel is more important than what I say, right? Because ultimately you know your body best. The good thing about ketone IQ is that the mechanism of action is butanediol as the raw ingredient. It goes to your liver and gets converted to BHB, which is beta hydroxybutyrate, the main ketone body that we metabolize for energy. Why do I tell you this? It's because through that process, your liver becomes the gatekeeper. Your liver gets signal from the rest of your body and says, okay, I have enough ketones now. I don't need that much ketones. So it will slowly release out ketones from the butanediol from ketone IQ. That way you will have a longer sustained ketosis and you will still have that fuel. And for people who are not already in ketosis, then the liver will kickstart and really pump in the BHB in. And we have seen this in our internal study as well, because even I think it was me, my CEO, and our chairman, Jeff and Michael, three of us, we did it on camera on a podcast on YouTube. I think you can find one of those videos. We had 3 different doses. And I believe Jeff was already intermittent fasting. He was on an OMAD, eating one meal per day. And his ketone levels was already quite high, I believe close to 1. But even at a higher dose, his ketone kind of leveled and peaked at 2.5. And then myself and Michael, we had our ketones quite low, like 0 point something, 0 point less than 0.5, and we raised it up to like 1 or closer to 2 actually. So the delta is much bigger if you're not already in ketosis. And when you are already in ketosis, your body will be able to regulate how much ketones you're getting. Now, the difference, I think, is how long you can sustain that. And I believe that if you're already doing a ketogenic diet and have plenty of ketones in your body, and then you top it up with ketone IQ, that will sustain enough ketones for you to have that energy level for a longer exercise period.
So 2 things, liver congestion, and 2, metabolic flexibility, people that think they need to be in nutritional ketosis 24/7. So I have to say it before I forget. So liver congestion, a lot of people, because I'm doing functional lab testing, helping identify the hidden internal sources of chronic stress. So when you're hearing these stories, do you find people that are trying to do all this ketosis stuff and they still struggle trying to get results? Because maybe they're taking this stuff and maybe they test and they're trying to get higher ketones. And, it seems like so many people I get have signs and symptoms of liver detox phase 1 and 2 congestion. So I wonder if that impacts their ability to make more ketones or monitor ketones.
When you say liver congestion, what is it congested with?
Liver that you're not able to detoxify. So your just liver has, say 500 different jobs people say to do. And so we're giving it one more job to metabolize fats and to break down fatty acids and get those ketones from that, make that beta hydroxybutyrate, why we call it BHB.
Yeah.
It's easier to spit out. So if they struggle, those people that can't make their own ketones, because even if they're doing lower carb diet, I just you might not have any clue what I'm talking about, but I just was thinking of, I was thinking the liver. How's the liver playing this?
Well, if you think about the liver, so there are 2 different functions of the liver here, and they're quite separate. So when you're on a ketogenic diet, your liver converts the fatty acid into BHB.
Yeah.
Whereas if you drink ketone IQ, it converts BDO, butanediol, into BHB. So it's not fatty acid. So it may actually be 2 separate pathways. So especially for people who are struggling to get into ketosis via nutritional ketosis or ketogenic diet. So we have had customers who told us that they have been very strict and they have been very stringent on their diet. And for some reason, either their liver is not converting the fats enough into ketones, or they are on some form of medication which increases blood sugar, which in turn increases insulin that inhibits ketogenesis. So they drink ketone IQ, and that managed to raise their blood ketone levels above 1, which they are aiming to do.
So then why should, go back to what we've talked before about, but why do people need to have ketones higher level if they're not exercising?
So
if they have brain health issues.
So when the first exogenous ketones came out in 2017, it was marketed as elite athlete fuel, super fuel, because
I remember that.
The whole reason why it was invented to begin with was funded by the military, by the US government, to be able to fuel military personnel on long and demanding journeys, right? So that's why it was marketed and positioned that way, because it really helps with endurance, with cognitive performance, especially in hypoxia and low oxygen environment. And we have seen this in our own study with the contract with the DoD. We saw an improvement in reaction time, improvement in memory recall, especially when they saw a decline of those parameters in hypoxia. With ketones, it actually improves. So over time, because of the use of ketogenic diet in therapeutic areas such as epilepsy that has been going on for more than a century now, we are also seeing the benefits of ketones in general, the presence of ketones in our bodies, in metabolic health, in metabolic flexibility, in brain health, In failing heart, actually, failing heart upregulates ketones naturally,
Mhm.
keto metabolism, because it's way more efficient as a fuel. That's the theory around it, the hypothesis, but it's yet to be tested specifically for that mechanism of action. So then, when we're talking about performance, we're talking about a threshold of 2 millimolar, 2.0 millimolar. Once you reach there, that's the Goldilocks zone for performance. And then there is nutritional ketosis, which is 0.5 millimolar. And in between those two, there is a zone where sometimes you hear people talk about in conferences, which is the therapeutic ketosis, which is above 1.0 millimolar. So you don't need that high, but some form of ketone that is significant enough to be in your body will be able to impact your energy level, your brain equity, and your brain network stabilization. That has been shown via functional MRI in studies. Just one dose of ketones have an acute effect on the interaction between brain regions, which is super interesting because you are activating these neurons and whatnot. It's essentially just providing your brain with the energy demand that it needs. And that's why a lot of people are looking into the synergistic effect of psychedelics and brain treatments with ketones, because, like, for example, psychedelics, it increases brain activity, but that also indirectly or directly increases brain energy demand. So where does the brain get the energy from, right? And if you are insulin resistant, if you have metabolic inflexibility, you can't pull up glucose into the brain. That leaves lactate and ketones. And if you don't have ketones, then it's only lactate, which is very limited, and that may be detrimental, right? So having exogenous ketones in there really help meet that demand that your brain needs. So I think if you are not, doing performance, if you're not doing exercise and really boosting your performance using ketones, I think just in general, having some form of ketones in your body is still better than none, just from a metabolic health point of view, and also from an evolutionary point of view, right? If you think about, prehistoric humans, or when they go for hunting and they don't have storage system, so they can't store their food, so they will go through periods where they have plenty of food abundance, and they have periods where they don't have food and they're fasted and they're going through famine or whatever. And during those times, you get the ups and downs of your hormones, and the ketogenesis kicks in and really gear you up for the hunting sessions, because now you have to endure that physical performance as well as the cognitive sharpness in order to hunt food down. So now in modern day human being, we are so readily, food is so readily available that we are always snacking, we're always eating, we're always up-regulating insulin, so that we are not producing enough ketones in our bodies. So if we are to replicate what our ancestors do, and have some form of ketones, it may actually be beneficial, as we have seen in studies, as we age as well. I think for the aging brain, I think this is a new area of study,
cool.
which is super cool and interesting. Both the aging brain and the injured brain, traumatic brain injury, also saw a deficit in energy and a dysfunction in glucose metabolism in the brain, which again could be addressed by putting in ketones, because ketones are being pulled into the neurons and the cells via a different transporter than glucose, because glucose goes in via glucose transporters, and ketones go in via MCT, which is monocarboxylase transporters. So there are two different pathways. And if one pathway, the glucose transporter pathway, is already dysfunctional, now you're providing a separate group of substrate that the brain can actually have access to in order to create the energy that you need. So
Wow, that's a lot. Fascinating. So, but going back to metabolic flexibility, if you are good at, you have ability to burn fat, you have good fat metabolism. We talk a lot, the pendulum swinging, fat to protein into fasting too much, but the, carbs, no carbs. What we're hearing more about is you still need to be able to metabolize carbohydrates. And so not being just strict nutritional ketosis 24/7, you should do a 5 one day, for example, that people are talking about the 5 days intermittent fasting, do nutritional ketosis. One day you're not in ketosis, and then one day you're doing fasting. And then there's other theories, save your carbs for nighttime. And then there's other late luteal phase women need to be not nutritional ketosis. So are you finding there's ideal times and times not to take exogenous ketones or be in nutritional ketosis?
I think exogenous ketones can be taken at any time, to be honest, because it's such a small dose.
Mhm.
It's 70 calories. You can
Yeah.
literally walk it off, right? But the benefit to your brain is so pronounced and long lasting. It lasts for hours that it's just a no-brainer, right?
So it's okay to take every day.
Yeah, it's okay to take every day. We recommend not taking more than 3 doses a day, but if you're exercising, you're burning them really quickly. A lot of our athletes takes way more than 3 doses a day. But when it comes to nutritional ketosis, now you're talking about a much more overhaul of your system, because you are decreasing glucose, you're decreasing insulin, you're really upregulating the fat metabolism and all of that. So then you have to be more careful on the hormones, because exogenous ketones, keto IQ is transient, whereas ketogenic diet, especially if you sustain ketogenic diet, is going to have a sustained effect or impact on your body metabolism as well as your hormonal system. And as we know, a lot of our hormones are also made out of fats. So the upregulation and downregulation of fat metabolism also directly affect the hormone system. So I think, in terms of, I was going to say, lost my train of thought here.
I threw a lot at you because if I don't say it, I forget it. That's why I need more ketones to get brain health.
Right.
I just said, wondering if there's anything, everyone's saying don't be in ketosis. If people that are doing strict nutritional ketosis, not be in ketosis, say Sundays or days 25 to 28 of your menstrual cycle.
Exactly. So I got my thought back. Thank you. So I think it really boils down to the person. It's like how you answer me when I ask you how much zone 2 I need and how much zone 5 I need. It's exactly that. It depends. It really depends on the person, on how keto adapted they are, on how susceptible they are. With glucose, how much glucose. Some people may be more sensitive to glucose, or some people might be more prone to developing insulin resistance if they have a bit too much glucose. And I'm not a fan of demonizing one particular substrate over the other, because I do believe that if our bodies are designed to be able to metabolize glucose, fats, and proteins and ketones, then we're meant to be able to take them all in. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the problem is having too much of one thing, and the body balances out and overcompensate, and then the dysfunction occurs.
Yes.
So that's the problem.
That's
here.
with everything.
Yeah, exactly. So it's always, you and I talk a lot about the Goldilocks zone. Everything needs to be in the optimal range, rather than cutting everything out or putting like shit ton of something in. We need to stay in that optimal zone.
Yeah, and that's dependent on the person.
Exactly. And yes, processed sugar is bad. Yes, seed oil is bad. And yes, to all of that, if in combination especially, drives up inflammation, increases risk of insulin resistance, increases risk of developing chronic disease and heart disease. However, we do need to acknowledge that our body fundamentally needs glucose, right? The brain uses glucose, the heart uses, muscles uses glucose a lot. And even if you're in ketogenic diet, even if you're fasting, you're not taking in any glucose, measure your blood glucose. You will have a baseline. Why? Because our body creates our own blood glucose, right? Our body creates our own glucose from other storage, from glycogen, from fats, from glutamate, from amino acids via gluconeogenesis. That itself is enough to tell us that even when we're not eating glucose, our bodies need glucose. So it's not about demonizing. It's not saying that all sugar is bad, but I'm saying excessive calories, whether it's sugar or fat, especially if taken together, it's bad. And taking processed food is bad.
Yeah. Well, that's what
that answers.
Yeah, no, that's what I say all the time on the show. It's not, keto, carnivore, paleo, primal. It's just eat real food that balances your blood sugar. Take out the white flour, refined sugars, vegetable oils, packaged foods, the garbage, and you just eat from, like Paul Chek said, I think I learned that when I did his program forever ago, is, eat from the ground, what you can fish, what you can grab. I mean, it's just natural, real food that, if you have it in the right balance. But then also what I've been really focused on is prioritizing protein, getting that first. Like that's how your meal should figure out your meals, so you hit your protein goals. If you listen to the research on protein and muscle organ longevity and Gabrielle Lyon's research, I'm more about like, let's focus on the protein and then adjust your fat and then adjust your carbs and time your carbs to your workout intensity, duration, time of day. That's going to be probably more impact on you than just, okay, I'm going to do keto and eat all fat and forget.
And that's also another great point, because if you think about your body, if you fast, right, it will burn off the glucose first, and then it'll burn off the fats, right? It'll produce ketones. It will always leave your protein last.
Yes.
And that tells you that your body will always prioritize protein and how valuable proteins are. It's not when we think about protein, we often think about muscles and bodybuilding and weightlifting. It's not just that. All your hormones, enzymes, and organelles within your cells are made out of proteins. So and also like receptors, glycoproteins, all of that, it needs all the building block of amino acid, essential amino acids, proteins, right? So that's why your body will always break down fats and glucose, which are, yes, they are being used to build, parts of your metabolism and your physiology, but mainly they are being metabolized for energy. For energy production. So that's why they will prioritize metabolizing those two first. And if you are at extreme starvation mode, then it will tap into your protein, because there's nothing else, because survivability comes first, and then protein comes second, right? So because protein is needed for your body to properly function. So listening to your body, or just taking information on how our physiology works, on how metabolism works, it is able to tell you what you should be prioritizing, what you should be looking into, that our body will prioritize, because our body will always be the true north. It will always prioritize yourself. You will always prioritize your own survivability over anything. And if you have the data that shows that, you should listen to it.
And that's what I keep talking about on my little solo podcast I've been doing. Like, learn how to listen to those red flags, know how to eat when you're hungry. If your body's growling and you're hungry, it's not mindless eating. You're eating because your body's saying, I need some fuel. I'm running lower than I should. And just eat. I think we get so strict because everyone in my circle seems to be these high performers, ambitious, and we take all this information and do it to the extreme. And how to find, that Goldilocks effect again, that happy dose to make it a positive response, rather than causing more stress by not eating enough and having that low energy availability and fasting too long, and they're exercising hard and they're just overdoing everything. And then we create this whole metabolic chaos.
And it's like so hard to really pinpoint and measure what is overworking as well.
Yeah.
Right. Because to you do it every day. Like, it's what you're passionate about. So it's not hard for you. So you're not necessarily feeling like you're overworking it, but your body is overworking it. So that's also another thing. And then that's what, we should be thankful for in terms of technology, to be able to measure all of that metrics to let us know that our body sometimes may not align with how we feel. Especially if the system is disconnected. Most of the time it does tell us, if we're hungry, we should eat. If we're tired, we should rest, or whatever.
But it's disconnected for most people.
Yeah. And I myself struggle with it, right? Like, I tend to work a lot and tend to really push myself, especially in this area, like really hosting like HVM and podcasts, and really pushing the quality of content going out, and my social media, and really help with correcting misinformation out there around science and metabolism. And most of the things we say is not rocket science. It's not Nobel Prize level novelty. It's a lot to do with logic, but it is not as loud as somebody who's out there spreading misinformation because they're controversial. So, it's hard. So in order to make that information more, you have to be creative, you have to be more captivating and all of that.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I forget, I'm like, oh wait, I worked for like 14 hours today, that's no, I forgot to work out, or like I forgot to
Yeah.
eat, especially. Just because I enjoy this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about it. So I think, yeah, I think there's always it's always a range that we just need to play around with the lever.
Life is not a race, it's a journey.
Yeah, there you go.
We keep learning and growing and trying new things, and it's just an ongoing experiment. It's called life.
Yeah.
So where can we look up the articles will come out? Will they be sent via your messaging system, the HVMN
Usually
email blog?
yes. So I think the metabolic psychiatry email will be out this week, I believe tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm actually writing the synopsis for that. And the other one should also be out in an email when it's out. Usually we do feature them in our email. So go to hvmn.com and subscribe to our email list. We also send out updates on our weekly podcast that I host, HVMN podcast, and you can learn about who the guests are, what are the topics as well, or you can just go straight and subscribe to HVMN podcast on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube, and then you can find me at Lat Manso on all social media.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and we'll figure out how to meet in July down here in San Diego and do some experimenting.
Yeah,
It'll be
I would
fun.
love to. I would love to.
Okay, let's keep in touch. Thanks so
All right.
much. Great information.
Thank you.